All right, welcome to our Miscanthus update for landowners and farmers. Thank you for joining me. We are going to hop right into it tonight, and I'm going to go to the next slide here. Tonight's topics are going to include a couple different things, including our brief history of Miscanthus here in Northeast Ohio, the current status of Miscanthus, what is going on right now with the crop, removing Miscanthus, some information on how to remove Miscanthus and techniques of removing Miscanthus, the cost to remove Miscanthus, how much it will cost to do so, and then possible options for landowners and farmers when it comes to removing it and the cost to remove it. Next, we will be going to the county auditor's office to talk about CAUV and an update from our county auditor, David Thomas and Heather Hall. And then at the end, like I mentioned, we will have a little bit of time for Q&A if there are any questions from the attendees. So let's go into the history. If you're joining this webinar, you are probably aware of the history of Miscanthus, so I won't go too far into detail, but I do want to share a little bit of information because I think it's important to understanding where we are now with this biomass crop. So Miscanthus giganteus is also known as giant miscanthus, is a sterile hybrid of grass that's grown for biomass and biofuels. It's important to remember that this crop is sterile and that it does not spread by seed so that it will not become invasive. Some of the early studies done on it showed that over, I believe, a 10-year period, it moves about 3 feet. So it is not of concern of escaping these fields and moving, throughout the county or through waterways, like some of the more invasive grass species that are similar, like Phragmites. Roughly 4,600 acres of Miscanthus was planted here in Northeast Ohio and Northwest Pennsylvania since 2011. A lot of that, or not a lot of that, but a percentage of that has been removed or taken out of Miscanthus production. So we're not quite at that level. But since about 10 years ago, that's how much has been planted overall. So we are about 10 years into this crop, being 2021. And it was originally predicted to have a lifespan of 15 to 20 years. There's not a lot of research that has been done on Miscanthus, and it's not a very prominent crop here in the United States. So it's, there's still a lot of learning that's being done and still a lot that we do not know about this crop. But we are still in the prime of what was predicted to be the prime of the Miscanthus crop, and thoughts that it could go for 20, maybe more years, depending on growing conditions and how it was managed. The USDA selected this location here in Northeast Ohio and Northwest Pennsylvania as a project area for the Biomass Crop Assistance Program. And that program encouraged biomass crops by providing grant funding, which Auditor, who planted the Miscanthus, took part of. So when Miscanthus was being introduced, there were many possible uses that were planned for Miscanthus and thought of to use Miscanthus for, which included burning it along with coal for energy to make a more green energy source. They also considered biofuels, fluorine, and all kinds of other products for this Miscanthus product, or biomass, excuse me. More recently, and the final products that Auditor made were the compostable food containers, as well as the absorbent used in the oil field. So these two products, it was a clamshell to-go container. You've probably seen those in restaurants, but this one was 100% biodegradable. And then it was also used, it was ground down to a fiber that was used as an absorbent for all kinds of stuff, but mainly for the oil field industry. So Aliterra was the company that came in and planted all the Miscanthus here, and was renting ground from landowners to plant it and harvest it. But eventually, because of many things, economic conditions, all kinds of factors, internal and external to Aliterra, they were unable to pay landowners and other debts that they accrued, and they went into a court-appointed receivership, which is an alternative to bankruptcy, and they went into that in early 2020. So that's a brief history. I know I've probably glossed over some of the things over the last 10 years, but that's a brief history of the Miscanthus crop here in Northeast Ohio and Northwest Pennsylvania over the last 10 years. So where are we at now? Currently, after Aliterra went into receivership, most of the Miscanthus has not been harvested for the last couple of years, which puts the landowners that were leasing their ground to Aliterra at risk of losing their CAUV tax deduction. It leaves these fields not in production, and it has created quite a difficult situation for landowners because the Miscanthus is very difficult, but not impossible to terminate compared to other perennial crops due to the size of the Miscanthus and the structure of the plant. In addition, Aliterra is no longer in existence, and all the lease agreements that they had with landowners are now null and void, meaning landowners are able to do what they wish with the Miscanthus on their property, whether it's sign up with another company, which we'll talk about here in a second, or terminate the crop and plant traditional row crops with other renters. So Aliterra, that I just mentioned, no longer exists, but it has been reorganized as Warrior Marketing LLC, that contains many of the same people that were part of Aliterra, that ran Aliterra, including John Griswold. So Warrior Marketing plans on marketing Miscanthus and not producing anything like Aliterra did. Aliterra planned to harvest and manufacture products using Miscanthus and sell the end product. Warrior Marketing's plan, as relayed to me, was to market Miscanthus and then share the profits from those sales with the landowners, minus the expenses from harvesting and their marketing costs, obviously. So Warrior Marketing is what has become of Aliterra, came out of Aliterra after the receivership, and they have actually harvested and sold some Miscanthus already this year. The issue there is that right now that there's not a lot of demand, and they do not have a ton of customers, so they are not taking on all the acreage currently in Miscanthus. They have only taken on a small portion of the acreage to fill some of their orders for Miscanthus, but they have shared with me that they would like to increase that, and there are some things in the works that could possibly provide them more demand, which means they could take on more acres of Miscanthus. So Warrior shared that they also share that they will be forced to reduce low yielding acres and acres with a high travel cost. If you had a lease with Aliterra, more than likely you have received a letter from John or from Aliterra Warrior Marketing that states pretty much all of this information of the current status of Miscanthus. So most landowners are already familiar with this information. Like I said, the main issue being that there's not enough demand for all of the acres to be marketed right now. So looked at a little bit of the history. We looked at the current status. We're in a time period where there's We need something to happen, or else we're going to see some issues specifically with CAUV. But we want to see the land being used productively. So I shared with you a little bit about Warrior Marketing, and their plan is to continue the Miscanthus production and market it to other producers. But now we're going to be talking about removing Miscanthus. So another alternative, taking the Miscanthus out and planting traditional row crops, corn, soybeans, wheat, and hay. So moving along, the process of removing Miscanthus can be complicated, it can be expensive, and it can be difficult. I do want to be upfront with everybody that, that there has been stories, going around, people have shared of the difficulties of removing Miscanthus, of popping tires, of spending money trying to remove Miscanthus. It is possible. There's not a lot of studies and information out there regarding Miscanthus removal, but it has been successfully done in Ashtabula County here in Northeast Ohio. So, we are going to go over some of the information on how to remove it, but I always do want to share that it is not impossible. It has been done in Ashtabula County, and I anticipate that it will be done again many times, and we will learn, the tricks of the trade of getting rid of Miscanthus. Alrighty, so the first step in removing Miscanthus, and one that we've found to be probably one of the bigger roadblocks when it comes to transitioning back into traditional crops, is cutting or removing the biomass from the field. The reason this has been such an issue is that, Miscanthus is a huge biomass crop that grows up to 12 feet tall and can be very thick in fields. Some fields are not as thick as others, but if you get into a field of very thick Miscanthus, 12 feet tall, it is not like mowing a pasture or mowing a hay field. It's a completely different animal. And a lot of the equipment that we have here in Northeast Ohio, traditional farm equipment for mowing hay or brush hogging, is not big enough to handle the sheer amount of biomass that is produced in these Miscanthus fields. Now, if it's a smaller field that has a thinner stand, I've heard of people having success in mowing that with some of their other equipment. But a lot of these fields that are bigger, thicker fields with a lot of biomass that, again, maybe hasn't been harvested in a year or two or three, there's a lot of stuff there that needs to be mowed. And you really see why this first step of cutting it or removing it has been such a roadblock for people here in Northeast Ohio. So harvesting the crop and removing it obviously is one way to get rid of it. That is difficult because there's not much of a market for it. I know there are some landowners that were able to have Warrior Marketing harvest their crop this year, and that could be a possibility in the future, working with Warrior Marketing, taking off a crop and then saying it was a 1 year thing, and then next year terminating that crop and putting in traditional row crops. Like I said, with the low demand, that may not be a possibility for everybody. The next option would be mowing the biomass and leaving it in the field. Now, like I said, if you have a very thick field, that's a lot of biomass, that's a lot of organic matter to leave in the field. But if you are able to chop it with a machine like this here, pictured on the screen, it will degrade into the soil and eventually, break down and become part of the soil relatively quickly if it's chopped to a small size. We'll talk a little bit more about possibilities for chopping it later on. And then finally, burning the biomass in the field is one more option to rid your field of the biomass. This is not recommended without approval from your local fire department. I know there are some fire departments in the county that have said that they do not want any of the miscanthus to be burnt. It is a huge fire hazard. It can be unruly, and if there are any houses or structures nearby, it could be very dangerous to set those fields on fire. That being said, I do know of some fields that have been burnt with the permission of the local fire departments, and it was able to get rid of the biomass in the field. Now, that being said, if you do decide to go with the burning option, this will increase the vigor and the growth of the miscanthus. So if you burn it off, you need to make sure that you have a plan to control it afterwards, because it will come back stronger and faster than before. We suggest a chemical control following a burning, so to slow the growth of the miscanthus. So I mentioned chopping it. Right now, Dot Stater Custom Harvesting is the only entity that I know of that will mow the miscanthus for you. They are the company or the people that the Warrior Marketing Group has hired to custom harvest their miscanthus. So they will, they are in the area. They are familiar with miscanthus. They know how to handle it. They have the correct machinery to handle it, and they are willing to be hired to chop miscanthus and leave it in the field for a price of around $62 an acre. Like I said, this is the only known custom harvester for miscanthus here in Northeast Ohio that I know of. If there is anyone who is wanting to advertise custom harvesting of miscanthus, or if you know of anybody that is, let me know. I would love to share that information. Like I said, mowing or removing the biomass is really the biggest, or one of the biggest barriers when it comes to terminating miscanthus. If you are interested in Dot Stater's custom harvesting, I have their phone number up there, 315-794-9008. Contact Josh and let him know you're interested, and then find the time and work it out to have your miscanthus mowed. So that's what we have on the first step of removing the biomass. Like I said, this is usually one of the biggest barriers. If you have smaller equipment, we've heard stories of people trying to brush hog it and popping tires, people trying to brush hog it and having issues with their equipment because there's so much biomass getting piled up and stuck inside their mower or their brush hog. It's not an easy crop to mow, and with the equipment that Dot Staters have, they're able to chop it up very finely, like I said, so that it breaks down a little bit quicker. So the next step in removing the miscanthus is terminating it or killing it. And I'm going to go over two different options, the first being chemical control and the second being mechanical control. Chemical control is in reference to using a herbicide. For giant miscanthus, glyphosate is a viable option, and it has been proven to be effective in heavy doses when applied to miscanthus. So glyphosate is the active ingredient that is in Roundup. It does take a high dose of Roundup to be effective in this crop, but if you do end up getting your crop mowed, burnt off, or harvested, the recommendation from the University of Illinois is to wait until the Miscanthus is 12 inches tall before applying. So you want to make sure there's plenty of green plant there before you hit it with a herbicide application of glyphosate. There have been reports that it could take multiple applications to get complete control. That being said, if you plant your field with a Roundup ready crop like soybeans or corn, you will be able to have more control those following years as you do your regular herbicide post applications for those crops. So spraying it with glyphosate after removing the Miscanthus and it's grown to 12 inches, tillage, and then planting it with Roundup ready corn or soybeans will allow you to have even more Roundup applications after planting. All right, so the next one is mechanical control, and this would be more of an option if you are not planning on putting it into production immediately. You just want to kill the Miscanthus, and maybe you don't want to use a herbicide treatment. Repeated mowing close to the ground will kill Miscanthus over time. Now, I say over time because this could take 2 to 3 growing seasons to get a majority of it, and then even longer to get a complete control of the Miscanthus. So for mowing it exclusively, it's recommended to mow it once a month, sometimes more if it's at the beginning of the growing season and the plant is really, really active. At minimum, 2 to 3 times a year, mowing it close to the ground will, slowly deplete the rhizomes of their energy and eventually kill the Miscanthus plant. So again, this must be cut when it is actively growing, not when it's dormant. So in the fall and the winter, when it's brown, cutting it will not do anything to kill it because the energy has already been sent down to the rhizomes. When it is green, the energy is in the leaves, and mowing it then repeatedly will slowly deplete it of that energy. Again, some people have experienced pop tires trying to mow their Miscanthus. If you do plan on mowing it, be cautious. Some people have mowed over it one way, and when they've come back the other way, the stubble has been pointed towards that direction, and when they come back at it, it is primed to enter the tire at the right angle. So, if you are planning on mowing it yourself, making sure you have the correct size equipment, larger the better, and making sure that you're not getting your mower stuck with Miscanthus or covered with Miscanthus so that it could heat up and possibly catch fire. So a little bit more about glyphosate in terms of giant Miscanthus. The research done, there isn't a whole lot on Miscanthus termination, but one of the main articles or one of the main research studies was done at the University of Illinois by Eric Anderson. You can see there at the top herbicide phytotoxicity response and eradication studies in Miscanthus giganteus. He found that glyphosate followed by mowing significantly reduced each dependent variable and provided the most effective control. So, of course, you have to mow it first, but then a glyphosate application and then followed by mowing mechanical control, like we mentioned, they found was the most effective. And they also found that after 2 years of cropping with a Roundup ready crop, like I mentioned previously, Miscanthus was significantly terminated. They also mentioned it wasn't completely terminated. So I've seen this in Miscanthus fields that have been switched over to traditional row crops here in Ashtabula County. Most of the Miscanthus is terminated, but maybe along the wood line where the herbicide application isn't as heavy, or where it's missed with some tillage, there was some miscanthus growing up along, the fence row and up along the wood line. So in that case, you're going to have a spot treatment of herbicide to those difficult areas that pop up after a few years. So as the miscanthus is terminated, the yield will improve. They found that the first year, if there was a significant amount of miscanthus still in the field, it did affect the yield. Competing miscanthus is very competitive, so it's corn and soybeans will see a decrease in yield if there is a significant amount of miscanthus left in the field. So we want to try and get a good control before planting. But then again, the planting does allow for more herbicide to be applied and hopefully controlling more of the miscanthus along the way. All right. So I don't have it in here, but the next step after applying your herbicide or mowing it, your mechanical control until it's terminated, the next step will be tillage. We've found success in continuous tillage and letting some of the rhizomes come up to the surface and dry out so that they die if they weren't killed by the glyphosate. But if your plan is to spray it and then plant a Roundup Ready crop, tilling it like you would a normal field till it's in the condition that is suitable for planting is what we recommend. So moving on to the cost of removal, there is quite a bit of cost in removing miscanthus, and it can be expensive depending on how it's done. Most situations will have cost to remove it or to mow it. We'll have a cost to apply the chemical, the herbicide. So, minimum one heavy glyphosate application. The tillage cost, if you hire somebody to till the land after it is sprayed with the herbicide, and then nutrient replacement cost. So there really hasn't been much fertilizer applied to these miscanthus fields since they were planted. And as the biomass is removed, so is some of the nutrients. And while miscanthus produces a lot of biomass, it does not take out as many nutrients as maybe a corn or a soybean crop. But Michigan State University found that miscanthus could remove 88 pounds of nitrogen, 8 pounds of phosphorus, and 126 pounds of potassium per acre on average per year. So since there wasn't much fertilizer, or if any, applied to many of these fields, that means that a lot of these fields are likely to be nutrient deficient, meaning that whoever ends up farming it after the termination of the crop will have to make up for that loss of nutrients, that deficiency of nutrients, and apply fertilizer. So there will be additional cost in fertilizer and nutrient replacement costs as well. So my next slide, I have a couple rough numbers. These are approximate numbers. They're calculations that I have put together. They're not official by any means, and they will vary depending on your situation and what you decide to do with the miscanthus. But I have a few numbers here to give you an idea of the possible costs of removing miscanthus on your properties. All right, so the first cost is the mowing cost. As I stated, the dot stator mowing will be charging $62 to mow. If you have your own equipment, or if you find somebody else to mow it, that could change. The application of glyphosate, roughly the price of glyphosate, and the average price for pesticide application, for custom pesticide application, is going to be around $60 an acre. And then for tillage, I included the price of chisel plowing and disking according to our Ohio Farm Custom Rate Survey, which is a survey that asks, people who do this for a living, that are custom applicators or custom, do custom farm work, how much they usually charge. So for those two, it was $40 an acre total. And then, like I mentioned, the fertilizer cost from the years without fertilizer application, that is not really known. There hasn't been much research in this area of what condition the fields are in. I was not comfortable with making an assumption for that one, especially right now because of the high fertilizer prices. They've skyrocketed here in the last couple months. But overall, I do believe that the cost of removing Miscanthus by mowing, applying a herbicide, and tilling it will be in the range of $175 per acre on up, depending on your situation and what needs to be done. So I know that number is very high, and it is it is what makes this situation so difficult for landowners that have not been receiving payments for their Miscanthus for a number of years now. So next up, I'm going to go over a few possible options for landowners and farmers when it comes to eradicating Miscanthus. And as we go forward, I do encourage anybody that does have questions to share them with me in our chat bots, in our Q&A bots, or if you'd rather talk to me one-on-one, you can always call the Ohio State Extension Office, 440-576-9008. So moving on to possible options. The first possible option is to pay custom operators and agribusinesses to remove the Miscanthus for you. This means paying, custom harvesters like Dot Stater and local agribusinesses that apply chemicals and such as the Centera Co-op and others, and then finding a custom, a custom applicator to till the ground as well. So when you look at this option, there is a large upfront cost that we just discussed, that 175 plus an acre that would have to be paid out of pocket by the landowner up front. And the advantages to that would be the land can be farmed immediately by anyone willing to rent it, even on a year-to-year basis. Or if the land needs to be sold and, you believe that it would raise your property value to have the Miscanthus removed more than it would to pay for that, then that might be a financial decision that you make to have it removed prior to sale. The next option, and one that we have been probably recommending the most when it comes to people who have given us their situation for their land when they call the extension office, is having the landowner and farmers make a deal to remove the biomass in exchange for not having to pay to lease the field for a couple of years. Now, this scenario or this option lets the landowner have less upfront cost with less out of pocket initially, and then it also we also recommend having a written lease agreement to ensure that both parties honor the agreement. If it's a multi-year lease, we always recommend having a written lease for any rental agreement, but especially when it comes to one like this, a written lease would be strongly recommended. So when it comes to trading miscanthus removal for free rent. When we look at the cost of, approximately $175 an acre to remove this miscanthus, and we look at the average cash rent in Ashtabula, so the average is $70 per acre for cash rent here in Ashtabula County. So that's the average field, and a lot of these miscanthus fields are worth a little bit less than that because they, were originally planted on less desirable farmland. Now I know some of them are planted on higher value farmland that is well drained, larger fields, but you need to remember that not every field is going to get $70 per acre rent for use, agricultural use of that field. That is just the average in Ashtabula County, so it includes all the best fields, all the worst fields combined. And then with that information, that $175 per acre cost to remove it and the $70 per acre average for rental, that gives us the range of 3 to 5 years of rent-free leasing of the property by the farmer, obviously depending on other variables. So ultimately it comes down to what the farmer is willing to do and what the landowner is willing to do. There are some farmers that say, that's going to cost me more than that and more time. And, my first couple of years of crops aren't probably going to yield as good as I would expect, as you would expect the field without removing the miscanthus. So they may say, I want 6 years. There are some that say, oh, I can get rid of the miscanthus really easily. It might be even less than that. So, these are just some examples and some rough estimates and suggestions for this possible option, but it really does seem like one that would work the best for landowners and for farmers. It takes care of some of that upfront cost that the landowners may not be able to cover. And, over time, that cost is spread out over time, which means maybe a few extra years for the farmer of rent-free land. But ultimately, it removes the miscanthus, it gets the land back in production to keep the CAUV, and it limits the out-of-pocket costs for the landowner. And then obviously combinations of those two programs, which, maybe you pay for the first glyphosate application as the landowner, or maybe you pay for the custom harvesting as the landowner, and then the farmer gets a year or two of rent-free leasing of that property. And then finally, as I mentioned at the top, working with Warrior Marketing to help market your miscanthus is still an option. It is limited because of the limited demand at the moment. They can't take all the acres. There is potential for more going forward, but we know that time is a concern when it comes to keeping your property in production. So be on the lookout for more information from Warrior Marketing. We will let you know if we hear anything else. But considering the history and the past of miscanthus, it is now your decision to make whether you want to continue with the miscanthus and then possibly market it for other uses, or if you want to transition it back into a traditional agricultural system. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David Thomas and Heather Hall over at our county auditor's office for a CAUV update.
Thank you, Andrew. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Perfect. Wonderful. Just wanted to real quick introduce myself, David Thomas, your county auditor. I chatted in the chat feature, our email and phone number. So the big key, and I'm going to have Heather to share a few minutes about CAUV and why this is such an important topic with miscanthus, as you all are aware. But the big key with all of this, because everyone's situation is so unique with this issue, is to contact us, be in touch with us, communicate with us. That's going to be really the best thing for you as a farmer, you as a property owner, you as someone who knows someone who's in this program. So please reach out to us, contact us. So Heather Hall in our office is our CAUV specialist. Probably many of you have met and talked with her already, but she's going to share a little bit about why this is so important with CAUV and Miscanthus, and some of the kind of takeaways that you can take for yourself and share with others for this topic. So Heather, go ahead.
Hi guys, I'm Heather Hall. So with CAUV and Miscanthus, we had a hard time where, Miscanthus wasn't getting planted, and, we weren't kind of sure how to run the program with CAUV, because typically you have to be planting and harvesting your crop every year. We come out and inspect. So what we had done in the past was, as long as we had a contract with Auditor, then you guys were receiving CAUV. Now with the changes, what we have been proposing, because we, like David said, every situation is different, every property is different. So we are kind of doing with this transition. We have about 59 people that we know of under CAUV that are receiving, that have the Miscanthus. Only 6 of them I have gotten a copy of the lease, because if you're going to continue with Warrior Marketing now, we need to see a copy of that lease agreement, so we know that you are going to continue with the Miscanthus. And we have about 16 people that reached out to me and said that they were removing it. So there's a lot of people out there that we really need to hear from. Are you guys going to get rid of it? Are you going to keep it? And we're kind of giving everybody until next year, 2022. To see something in production. So if we go out this summer, and we, maybe somebody didn't reach out to us and we marked, hey, they're getting rid of it. But if we don't see anything going on by next year, we're going to send a certified letter saying, hey, what are you guys doing? Or we're going to have to remove it from the program. But I think having that lease agreement is a good thing. If you are going to continue. I did have somebody tell me, and Andrew, I don't know if you've heard this too, is somebody's actually going to start mowing it for bedding, and they're going to use it for their own personal use, for the animals that they're selling, which is another option I've heard. I've also been contacting some large farmers. So if people need, that are interested in removing the Miscanthus, I have been trying to get them in contact with a farmer. So if anybody needs help, but you guys can always reach me. My direct line is 440-576-3788, or you can reach me by email, which is hrhall@ashtabulacounty.us. So I think I covered about everything.
And as Heather said, kind of the big necessity with being on CAUV and having cropland is that commercial activity. So when I came into office and spoke with Heather, and we worked with Andrew and a couple others, I would consider a contract, even if there isn't commercial activity on the actual property. If you have a contract, that's commercial activity. You're getting paid, or you're having a contract to get paid. And so we're trying to be as flexible as possible with folks. And that's one way we're able to do that. But if you don't have a contract, or if you're not working with a farmer to actually farm or to remove the property, remove Miscanthus from the property, that's really where the issue comes in. If we drive by and we see Miscanthus, we know you're not on a contract, you're on a lease, you're not doing anything to remove it. We really need to know what's kind of going on. The last thing that we want is to remove someone from CAUV, have that recoupment come in when you're actually, you're commercially farming it, or you are actively trying to remove or to do something with the property. So yeah, communicate with us is the big takeaway. But we're happy to answer questions now if you have questions and you want to chat them into. But we want to thank Andrew for his kind of allowing us a few minutes just to remind you about the importance of working with our office if you are on CAUV and have Miscanthus.
Fantastic. Thank you both. We'll open it up to questions now. If anybody does have any questions, this is a webinar, so we can't see you, we can't hear you if you raise your hand or shout out, but down at the bottom of your screen, or some of you at the top of your screen, there is a chat box, a little box that says chat and a little box that says Q&A. You can use either of those. You can click on those and type in a question and hit enter or send, and then we'll be able to read it. If not, we want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And again, this will be recorded. It is being recorded, and we will share it so that you can view it, or others that weren't able to attend can view it as well. Oh, go ahead, David.
Oh, you're fine. I was going to say, to bring up as an example, Heather, that individual that, said that they were going to farm it for bedding. Is that something, what was kind of our decision with that? Because in a sense, one would have to sell that Miscanthus to have that commercial activity as an example, or have some type of commercial benefit. You can't use it just for your own property. So what was kind of the end game with that one?
Yeah, he actually uses it for the commercial animals that he sells. So that then qualifies that Miscanthus for.
Perfect. Heather, can you type in your address, your email address, and
Yes.
for all of the attendees and the panelists? And we, our office there at the courthouse, we never closed during COVID. We've been open the entire time. So if you want to schedule an appointment to come and sit down and meet with Heather too, more than happy to have you come in and talk with Heather or any of us at our office to give you the information.
Excellent. Let's see, I did have a question here that talked about grants or help to pay for removing of this Miscanthus. Right now, as far as I know, there's no grants or funding available, which is really unfortunate. There was funding to put it in. Right now, there's not funding to take it out. We are looking at a few different options. I know some other agencies are looking at some other options for possibly helping remove it, but at the time we don't have any information on that. If I do hear anything, like I said, if I hear any information on people willing to help mow it, willing to provide grants or funding to help mow it or remove it, I will be sharing that broadly and widely as well. All right, so I do not see any other questions in the chat box. If you do have a question, if you were unable to use the chat box, go ahead and give our office a call, the extension office. We're available in Jefferson on Wall Street, and then we're also available by phone and by email, 440-576-9008.
There was a question there, Andrew.
Yes. Someone asked if I was in contact with John Griswold. I have been able to communicate with John a little bit. I reached out to him for some information on Warrior Marketing, which I shared with you all tonight. So there's still an interest in Miscanthus by John here in Asheville County and in Northeast Ohio that he shared with me his information on Warrior Marketing.
And just a side fun fact too, if any of you are on Homestead or are interested in getting on Homestead, our office is doing another webinar very similar to this tomorrow evening on the Homestead tax credit. So you can sign up on our website to get that information and watch a brief discussion and ask questions with our office too about the Homestead tax credit, which is another great benefit for folks who are senior citizens or permanently disabled. That may be you or someone you know. I had to put the little plug in. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. And then finally, if anyone is removing Miscanthus, if you've had experience with removing it, or if you remove it in the future and you find success or failure even, I encourage you to share that with our office just so that we can get the word out. There's, like I mentioned, there's not a ton of research on it, especially here in the United States. So any information that we can gather and share, it is excellent to share that with us so that we can share it with other landowners.
Heather, do you see that question?
Yeah, so he asked if Miscanthus is not your only crop, are you still eligible for CAUV? You are, but if you're not still going to use that Miscanthus, then it's not being used, so then it can be subject for removal because you're receiving CAUV on what you're commercially farming. Yes, you do receive a tax break on your woods if you're commercially farming over 10 acres, but it doesn't go the other way. Like even if you're commercially farming more than 10 acres and it's not Miscanthus, you still can't get that Miscanthus on CAUV. So worst case scenario, maybe you just, like I've heard some people just like the miscanthus. They just want to keep it around for the deer. That's fine. But, those acres could be subject for removal, and the rest of the property that you're planting in row crops can still qualify. You asked, what do you mean by removal? So anytime property comes out of CAUV, it's a recoupment. So it means, let's just say you have 5 acres of miscanthus that you just want to leave. It depends on what soils are on those 5 acres, because that's how you get your tax break. So what would happen is, if it comes out of CAUV, it's called a recoupment. So you would have to pay back the last 3 years that those 5 acres had saved on CAUV. And I'm happy to map that out for anybody who's interested. I can give you figures. And then those 5 acres, once removed, will then receive just the normal market value and get taxed that way.
Yeah, something becomes removed when essentially it changes its use. So when it goes from a commercially used, commercially farmed acre or section of your property to a non-commercial use, that's when it would get removed from the current use program, CAUV.
Fantastic. All righty. All right. Again, I want to
Thank you so much.
thank our auditor, and I want to thank Heather Hall for joining me and helping with this update. And if you have any other questions, please refer to one of our offices, and we can help get you some information. But we will be putting this out online for anyone that missed it, and we will also have some following up newspaper articles as well for those unable to join us by Zoom. But for all those who attended, thank you, and we will see you all later.
Enjoy the nice weather.
Yeah.
Yes.